today's live stream, we are going to be continuing the NIV Chronological Study Bible series. Today we're starting in Genesis 47, and we'll go on from there. I'm talking quiet because I'm outside, it's dark, and I'm assuming people are wanting to sleep, so I'm trying not to be a nuisance with my noise. But let's get it. Genesis 47, 1 through 50:26 is the last part of Genesis. Genesis 47. Joseph went and told Pharaoh, "My father and brothers with their flocks and herds and everything they own have come from the land of Canaan and are now in Goshen." He chose 5 of his brothers and presented them before Pharaoh. Pharaoh asked the brothers, "What is your occupation?" "Your servants are shepherds," they replied to Pharaoh, "just as our fathers were." They also said to him, "We have come to live for a while because the famine is severe in Canaan and your servants' flocks have no pasture. So now please, let your servants settle in Goshen." Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Your father and your brothers have come to you, and the land of Egypt is before you. Settle your father and your brothers in the best part of the land. Let them live in Goshen, and if you know of any among them with special ability, put them in charge of my own livestock." Then Joseph brought his father Jacob in and presented him before Pharaoh. After Jacob blessed Pharaoh, Pharaoh asked him, "How old are you?" Blessed are the blessed. This is based on Genesis 47, 7 and 10. Now I know I read this at the beginning last time, but this is just so we can have a clean transition. Bestowing a blessing on another was a common act in the ancient Near East. Inherent in the blessing process was the assumption by both parties that the one doing the blessing was superior to the one being blessed. Such superiority arose from a relationship to God, who was considered the source of blessing. God occasionally gave a blessing directly. This we can find in Genesis 2:3 and Genesis 32:26. To pronounce a blessing was not thought of as merely a ceremonial event. Rather, the pronouncement was seen as actually conferring a specific change in status. Since the name and power of God was used, the blessing once given could not be retracted, even if bestowed by deceit. Once Isaac mistakenly pronounced the blessing for the firstborn son upon Jacob, his younger son, Genesis 27:27 through 29, he could not reverse the action in order to bless Esau, his firstborn, Genesis 27:33 through 37. A subordinate could also bless. Years later, Jacob, a foreigner in Egypt, blessed the Pharaoh of Egypt. Since many died at a young age, old age was a sign that God's power resided with the one having a long life. Thus Jacob, an old man, was superior to the younger Pharaoh, who could benefit from Jacob's blessing him. Genesis 47, 7 and 10. Sometimes the Bible literally describes humans as a blessing, God. For example, Psalm 34:1, Psalm 115, 17 and 18. In some versions, the NIV uses other terms. In these cases, blessing God likely conveys the idea of giving all that a human can rightfully give to God, praise. And Jacob said to Pharaoh, "The years of my pilgrimage are 130. My years have been few and difficult, and they do not equal the years of the pilgrimage of my fathers." Then Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from his presence. So Joseph settled his father and his brothers in Egypt and gave them property in the best part of the land, the district of Ramses, as Pharaoh directed. Joseph also provided his father and his brothers and all his father's household with food according to the number of their children. Joseph in the famine. There was no food, however, in the whole region because the famine was severe. Both Egypt and Canaan wasted away because of the famine. Joseph collected all the money that was to be found in Egypt and Canaan in payment for the grain they were buying, and he brought it to Pharaoh's palace. When the money of the people of Egypt and Canaan was gone, all Egypt came to Joseph and said, "Give us food. Why should we die before your eyes? Our money is all gone." "Then bring your livestock," said Joseph. "I will sell you food in exchange for your livestock, since your money is gone." So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and he gave them food in exchange for their horses, their sheep and goats, their cattle and donkeys. And he brought them through that year with food in exchange for all their livestock. When that year was over, they came to him the following year and said, "We cannot hide from our Lord the fact that since our money is gone and our livestock belongs to you, there is nothing left for our Lord except our bodies and our land. Why should we perish before your eyes? We and our land as well. Buy us and our land in exchange for food, and we with our land will be in bondage to Pharaoh. Give us seed so that we may live and not die, and that the land may not become desolate." So Joseph bought all the land in Egypt for Pharaoh. The Egyptians, one and all, sold their fields because the famine was too severe for them. The land became Pharaoh's, and Joseph reduced the people to servitude, from one end of Egypt to the other. However, he did not buy the land of the priests because they received a regular allotment from Pharaoh and had food enough from the allotment Pharaoh gave them. That is why they did not sell their land. Joseph said to the people, "Now that I have bought you and your land today for Pharaoh, here is seed for you so you can plant the ground. But when the crop comes in, give a fifth of it to Pharaoh. The other 4/5 you may keep as seed for the fields and as food for yourselves and your households and your children." Now, the politics and the government of the area. Now, I see that 4 people are online. If you guys have any questions, put them in the comments. Politics and government. The Egyptian state supervised a bureaucracy capable of building pyramids and temples that required thousands of workers and years of effort. They kept meticulous records of commodities and of disbursements of food and drink to workers. We can see this in Genesis 47:24. There were no coins, but they had standardized sized loaves of bread. "You have saved our lives," they said. "May we find favor in the eyes of our Lord. We will be in bondage to Pharaoh." So Joseph established it as a law concerning land in Egypt, still enforced today, that a fifth of the produce belongs to Pharaoh. It was only the land of the priests that did not become Pharaoh's. Now the Israelites settled in Egypt in the region of Goshen. They acquired property there and were fruitful and increased greatly in number. Jacob lived in Egypt 17 years, and the years of his life were 147. When the time drew near for Israel to die, he called for his son Joseph and said to him, "If I have found favor in your eyes, and put your hand under my thigh and promise that you will show me kindness and faithfulness, do not bury me in Egypt, but when I rest with my fathers, carry me out of Egypt and bury me where they are buried." "I will do as you say," he said. "Swear to me," he said. And Joseph swore to him, and Israel worshipped as he leaned on the top of his staff. Genesis 48. Manasseh and Ephraim. Sometime later, Joseph was told, "Your father is ill." So he took his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, along with him. When Jacob was told, "Your son Joseph has come to you," Israel rallied his strength and sat up on the bed. Jacob said to Joseph, "God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan, and there he blessed me and said to me, 'I am going to make you fruitful and increase your numbers. I'll make you a community of peoples, and I'll give this land as an everlasting possession to your descendants after you.' Now then, your 2 sons born to you in Egypt before I came to you here will be reckoned as mine. Ephraim and Manasseh will be mine, just as Reuben and Simeon are mine. Just as Reuben and Simeon are mine. Any children born to you after them will be yours. In the territory they inherit, they will be reckoned under the names of their brothers. As I was returning from Padan, to my sorrow, Rachel died in the land of Canaan, while we were still on the way, a little distance from Ephrath. So I buried her there beside the road to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem." When Israel saw the sons of Joseph, he asked, "Who are these?" "They are the sons God has given me here." Joseph said to his father. Then Israel said, "Bring them to me so I may bless them." Now Israel's eyes were failing because of old age, and he could hardly see. So Joseph brought his sons close to him, and his father kissed them and embraced them. Israel said to Joseph, "I never expected to see your face again, and now God has allowed me to see your children too." Then Joseph removed them from Israel's knees and bowed down with his face to the ground. And Joseph took both of them, Ephraim on his right toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh on his left toward Israel's right hand, and brought them close to him. But Israel reached out his right hand and put it on Ephraim's head. though he was the younger, and crossing his arms, he put his left hand on Manasseh's head, even though Manasseh was the firstborn. Then he blessed Joseph and said, "May the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked faithfully, the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this day, the angel who has delivered me from all my harm, may he bless these boys. May they be called by my name in the names of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and may they increase greatly on the earth." When Joseph saw his father placing his right hand on Ephraim's head, he was displeased. So he took hold of his father's hand and moved it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. Joseph said to him, "No, my father, this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head." But his father refused and said, "I know, my son, I know. He too will become a people, and he too will become great. Nevertheless, his younger brother will be greater than he, and his descendants will become a group of nations." He blessed them that day and said, "In your name will Israel pronounce this blessing. May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh." So he put Ephraim ahead of Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, "I am about to die, but God will be with you, and take you back to the land of your fathers. And to you I give one more ridge of land than to your brothers, the ridge I took from the Amorites with my sword and my bow." Genesis 49. Jacob blesses his sons. Then Jacob called for his sons and said, "Gather around so I can tell you what will happen to you in days to come." The 12 tribes of Israel. Genesis 49, 1 through 28. Each tribe was a social group composed of many clans and families together with their dependents, outside the ties of blood kinship, who had become associated with the group through covenant, marriage, adoption, or slavery. Israel was an association of 12 tribes, designated by the names of the ancestors from whom they were descended. Deuteronomy 27, 12 and 13, Ezekiel 48, 1 through 35. The historical origins of the tribal units may be traced to the book of Genesis. Jacob, whose name was later changed to Israel in Genesis 32, 28, was the father of 12 sons. Genesis 29, 31 through 30, 24, 35, 18, and 22 through 26. The sons of Jacob, excluding Levi and Joseph, but including Joseph's sons Manasseh and Ephraim, were the ancestors of the later tribal units in the nation's history. The development of the tribes begins with the events described in the book of Exodus. The sons of Jacob, together with their father and families, migrated to Egypt to join their brother Joseph and to escape the famine in Canaan. Genesis 46, 1 through 27. Exodus 1, 16. They grew significantly in number for the next 400 years. Genesis 15, 13 and Exodus 12, 40. Then the descendants of Jacob's sons left Egypt in the Exodus under the leadership of Moses. They were joined by many who were not descendants of Jacob. These additional Exodus people are thus characterized as many other people, or the rabble, as Exodus 12:38 and Numbers 11:4 display. The number of dependents, those not of blood kinship, continued to increase as the tribal units developed. Moses' father-in-law, whose clan joined Israel in the wilderness, was a Midianite, Numbers 10:29. Caleb, who figured prominently in the conquest of the land of Canaan, was called a Kenizzite, Joshua 14:13 and 14. Later, the Calebites were given an inheritance among the tribe of Judah in Joshua 15:13. The tribal confederation with its institutions reached its highest from during the period recorded in the books of Joshua and Judges. The rigidity of Israel's tribal structure did weaken somewhat with the establishment of the United Kingdom under David and Solomon. But tribal organizations and association was maintained throughout later biblical history. Luke 2:36, Acts 4:36, Romans 11:1, and Hebrews 7:14. So let's go back to the actual scripture. "Assemble and listen, sons of Jacob. Listen to your father Israel. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, the first sign of my strength, excelling in honor, excelling in power, turbulent as the waters. Turbulent as the waters. You will no longer excel. For you went up unto your father's bed, unto my couch, and defiled it. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council. Let me not join their assembly. For they have killed men in their anger, and hamstrung oxen as they pleased. Cursed be their anger so fierce and their fury so cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel. Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. You are a lion's cub, Judah. You return from the prey, my son. Like a lion, he crouches and lies down. Like a lioness who dares to rouse him. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he to whom it belongs shall come. This happened already. Jesus came. And so now the scepter has departed from Judah. The scepter has departed from Israel, and it now belongs to the church. And the obedience of the nations shall be his. Again, that's Jesus Christ. He will tether his donkey to a vine, his colt to the choicest branch. He will wash his garments in wine, his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes will be darker than wine, his teeth whiter than milk. Zebulun will live by the seashore and become a haven for ships. His border will extend toward Sidon. Issachar is raw-boned donkey, lying down among the sheep pens. When he sees how good is his resting place, and how pleasant is his land, he will bend his shoulder to the burden, and submit to forced labor. Dan will provide justice for his people, as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan will be a snake by the roadside, a viper along the path that bites the horse's heels, so that its rider tumbles backward. I look for your deliverance, Lord. Gad will be attacked by a band of raiders, but he will attack them at their heels. Asher's food will be rich. He will provide delicacies fit for a king. Naphtali is a doe set free that bears beautiful fawns. Joseph is a fruitful vine near a spring, whose branches climb over a wall. With bitterness archers attacked him. They shot at him with hostility, but his bow remained steady. His strong arm stayed limber because of the hand of the mighty one of Jacob, because of the shepherd, the rock of Israel, because of your father's God who helps you, because of the Almighty who blesses you, with blessings of the skies above, blessings of the deep springs below, blessings of the breast and womb. Your father's blessings are greater than the blessings of the ancient mountains, than the bounty of the age-old hills. Let all these rest on the head of Joseph, on the brow of the prince among his brothers. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he devours the prey. In the evening he divides the plunder. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said to them when he blessed them, giving each the blessing appropriate to him. The death of Jacob. Then he gave them these instructions. I am about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave, in the field of Ephron, the Hittite, the cave in the field of Machpelah, near Mamre in Canaan, which Abraham bought along with the field as a burial place from Ephron to the Hittite. There Abraham and his wife Sarah were buried. There Isaac and his wife Rebekah were buried. And there I buried Leah. The field and the cave in it were bought from the Hittites. When Jacob had finished giving instructions to his sons, he drew his feet up into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. Genesis 50. Joseph threw himself on his father and wept over him and kissed him. Then Joseph directed the physicians in his service to embalm his father Israel. So the physicians embalmed him, talking a full 40 days, for that was the time required for embalming. And the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. When the days of mourning had passed, Joseph said to Pharaoh's court, If I have found favor in your eyes, speak to Pharaoh for me. Hi, Jay Hitman, how you doing? When the days of mourning had passed, Joseph said to Pharaoh's court, If I have found favor in your eyes, speak to Pharaoh for me. Tell him, my father made me swear an oath and said, I am about to die. Bury me in the tomb I dug for myself in the land of Canaan. Now let me go up and bury my father. Then I will return. Now it shows a little map of the area of Canaan, which I'm going to show you guys now. This is the map that it displays. It's a pretty cool looking map. Now it's fairly small. The text is fairly small, so it's hard to read. But this is Manasseh up here, Bashan, Reuben, Jeshur, and it's so on. And this is the whole land that Israel was living in. Pharaoh said, "Go up and bury your father as he made you swear to do." So Joseph went up to bury him, his father. All of Pharaoh's officials accompanied him, the dignitaries of his court, and all the dignitaries of Egypt, besides all the members of Joseph's household and his brothers, and those belonging to his father's household. Only their children and their flocks and herds were left in Goshen. Chariots and horsemen also went up with him. It was a very large company. When they reached the threshing floor of Atad, near the Jordan, they lamented loudly and bitterly. And there Joseph observed a 7-day period of mourning for his father. When the Canaanites who lived there saw the mourning at the threshing floor of Atad, they said, "The Egyptians are holding a solemn ceremony of mourning." That is why that place near the Jordan is called Abel Mizraim. So Jacob's sons did as he had commanded them. They carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave in the field of Machpelah, near Mamre, which Abraham had bought along with the field as a burial place from Ephron the Hittite. After burying his father, Joseph returned to Egypt together with his brothers and all the others who had gone with him to bury his father. Now that's the end of the book of Genesis. Well, we're actually coming to the end of the book of Genesis. This is the last chapter, and then we're going to be in Exodus. This is the image that it has to represent and show the area that we're going in. That's actually a temple building over near Manasseh. Today, the modern city of Khalil, Hebron, is built upon, not Manasseh, Machpelah, is built up around the site of Machpelah. The cave was once protected by a Christian church, but is now marked by a Muslim mosque. Muslims had stolen a lot of the Christian archaeology and a lot of the Christian sites. We must take it back. Anyway, Joseph reassures his brothers. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him?" So they sent word to Joseph saying, "Your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father." When their message came to him, Joseph wept. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. "We are your slaves," they said. But Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. The death of Joseph. Joseph stayed in Egypt along with all his father's family. He lived 110 years and saw the third generation of Ephraim's children. Also the children of Machir, son of Manasseh, were placed at birth on Joseph's knees. Then Joseph said to his brother, "I am about to die, but God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land to the land he promised an oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." And Joseph made the Israelites swear an oath and said, "God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up from this place." So Joseph died at the age of 110, and after they embalmed him, he was placed in a coffin in Egypt. Now this follows with a commentary based on the beliefs and ideas that surrounded the time. Egyptian ideas about death and the afterlife emphasized preserving the dead body from decay. Genesis 50, verse 26. The climate of Egypt is very dry, and the Egyptians were able to preserve bodies by drying them completely. This they did by burying them in nitron, a naturally found combination of baking soda and sodium carbonate. Now that was the end of Epic 2. Here are some notes from the Epic 2. Genesis 12:2 is specifically about blessings. Genesis 12:3 was about the earth and using Israel to bless the earth. Genesis 12:7 talks about the seed, the patronage, and the lineage of Israel, of Jacob. Genesis 13:15 continues on that idea. Genesis 14:1 was taken place during Babylonia, around Babylonia. Genesis 14:13 is about relatives and allies going on at the time with Israel. Genesis 15:1 is about their sovereignty and God being their shield and great reward. Genesis 15:2 was about the meaning of the Hebrew for this phrase, is about the Hebrews. Now, the meaning of the Hebrew for this phrase that we find in Genesis 15:2 is a bit uncertain, but for the most part, we know what it is. Genesis 15:5 is talking about the seeds. 15:18 is the river. Genesis 16:11 is about Ishmael and God hearing Ishmael. His name literally means God hears. Genesis 16:12 is about living in the east. And Genesis 13 is about seeing the back of God. Genesis 16:14 is about Ber Lahai Roi, which means the well of the living one who sees me. God is the living one who sees us. Genesis 17:1 is about El Shaddai. Genesis 17:5 is about Abram being exalted father. Abraham means the father of many, and Isaac means that he laughs, because in Genesis 17:19, both Abraham and Sarah laughed when God said that he would promise them children. Genesis 18:3 is talking about the eyes of the Lord. Genesis 18:6 is about the 36 pounds, or about 16 kilograms of weight. Genesis 18:18 will use his name in blessings. God's name will be used in blessings. Genesis 18:22, specifically from the Masoretic text, an ancient Hebrew scribal tradition, but the Lord remained standing before Abraham. The Lord stands in front of us and guides us. Genesis 18:24 is talking about forgiveness. Genesis 19:14 is about being married. Genesis 19:19 Genesis 19:19 is all the Hebrew singular. Genesis 19:22 is about Zor, meaning small. Genesis 19:37 is Moab, which sounds like the Hebrew for from father. Genesis 19:38 is Ben Ami, which is what Rachel first named Benjamin, which means sorrow, which means son of, well, it actually means son of my father's people. Hebrew Beni Ammon. That is about, and then Genesis 20:16 is about, it's described as the weight, 25 pounds or about 12 kilograms of whatever was going on right there. Genesis 21:3 is when Isaac was born, and it talks about his name meaning to laugh, or he laughs. Genesis 21:12 is about the seeds of Abraham. Genesis 21:16 is the Hebrew Septuagint for child. And these are all just notes about the Epic 2 and the descriptions about fully understanding the words that were given. But now we're going on to the book of Exodus, which is the beginning of Epic 3. The rise of a unified people. Let me make sure my cursor's on the arrow so I can change pages efficiently. The rise of a unified people. God miraculously delivered his people from the hands of the strongest nation of that day. These dramatic events would forever be proof that the Israelites were God's people. John Freeman, no, I'm not mad. I'm tired, it's late, and I'm outside. But no, I'm not mad. I just got an RBF. God miraculously delivered his people from the hands of the strongest nation of that day. These dramatic events would forever be proof that the Israelites were God's people. 1500 to 1200 BC. The Exodus marks the beginning. Hi, Rob Phillips. How you doing? The Exodus marks the beginning of Israel as a people. The patriarchs were at most an extended family, rather than a people. More such families undoubtedly moved to Egypt, either because of famine or because of the migrations of peoples all over the Middle East. When a dynasty of strong pharaohs returned to power, these foreigners were oppressed and put to forced labor. The escape of a large band of these slaves under the leadership of Moses was a new beginning for them. I'm not sad. I'm not pissed. I'm tired and I'm calm. I'm restful right now, and my resting face is an RBF. I'm working on keeping a smile, keeping a grin. I'm actually happy. I'm enjoying my time right now. Sorry if it looks that way. Sorry if it looks like I'm pissed off or if I'm sad. When a dynasty of strong pharaohs returned to power, these foreigners were oppressed and put to forced labor. Pardon my French, but RBF stands for resting bitch face. And it's really just having a face where when it's resting, it looks like you're mad. It looks like you're angry. It looks like you're in a mood. You could also change the B out for brat. resting brat face or resting brutish face. But it's just when my face is at rest, it looks like I'm angry, looks like I'm sad, but I'm actually not. I'm happy most of the time. But I'll try to add a little grin for you guys if it looks like that. I apologize for that. When a dynasty of strong pharaohs returned to power, these foreigners were oppressed and put to forced labor. The escape of a large band of these slaves under the leadership of Moses was a new beginning for the Israelites. If you're from the South, I know bless your heart ain't very happy. It's like it's a passive aggressive statement, but if you're not from the South, then thank you. The escape of a large band of these slaves under the leadership of Moses was a new beginning for the Israelites. Their experiences in the years of wandering in the wilderness, along with the great covenant ceremony at Mount Sinai, began to mold them into both a distinct religious entity and the nucleus of a nation. Their entry into Canaan and the struggle to maintain a separate identity in the face of culture and religious temptations strengthened their sense of being a people. Archaeology in the past. The oldest written records of significance for Palestine comes from the Late Bronze Age, 1500 to 1200 BC. The Amarna letters were part of the royal archive of Amenhotep IV, also known as Akhenaten, 1352 to 1336 BC. Sorry if I butchered that, I suck with Egyptian names. Akhenaten was more interested in religious reform than in foreign policy. He abandoned Egyptian activity in Palestine to pursue the introduction of monotheism based on the worship of the sun god Aten. Akhenaten's disinterest in administering the Egyptian empire resulted in turmoil and civil war in Palestine, and the Amarna letters reflect the disorder without the stabilizing influence of the Egyptian military. The kings of the city-states were increasing their own power at the expense of their neighbors. There were also raids by a people called the Habiru. Many of the Amarna letters appealed to the pharaoh for aid against the incursions of these Habiru. Other writings from the Late Bronze Age reflect a time of Egyptian power. An inscription of Merenptah first mentions of Israel in Egyptian documents. Merenptah commemorates his victories over the Libyans and other foreigners, boasting that all the peoples of Asia had submitted. One line reads, Israel is laid waste, his seed is not. The peoples in groups. Early in this period, Egyptian armies marched through Palestine into Syria, where they clashed with the Hurrians of Mitanni in modern Iraq. The greatest political accomplishments of the Hurrians was the Mitanni Empire, which ruled Assyria and lasted until the reign of Shalmaneser I of Assyria. Oh man, I love that God is powerful too. He's the one that gives us all strength, and without him we don't have any strength. 1273 to 1244 BC. They were even more important culturally, with their writings found from Assyria to Asia Minor to Egypt. Later in the Late Bronze Age, there were wars between Egyptians and the Hittites of Anatolia, modern Turkey. The Hittite Empire captured towns and regions such as Urugrit and Amuru from under Egypt's control. Hi, Rob. Hostilities with the Egyptians erupted again during the reign of Pharaoh Ramses II in 1279 to 1213 BC, who fought the Hittites to a stalemate in Syria and kept Palestine under Egyptian rule. Around 1200 BC, the Hittite Empire collapsed partly because of attacks by the Sea Peoples from the Aegeans and the rise of Assyria. Two ethnic or political groups played roles in Israel's history during the Late Bronze Age: the Midianites and Canaanites. The Midianites lived in northwest Arabia along the Gulf of Aqaba. They were shepherds, but also copper miners and traders. Moses fled to the land of Midian, where he married into the family of Jethro, a priest of Midian. We find this in Exodus 18. Much later, a related tribe of Midianites were involved in the Israelite worship of Baal of Peor, Numbers 25:16 through 18. The incident led to hostilities between Israel and Midian during the time of Moses, Numbers 31 1 through 8. The Canaanites were the inhabitants of Palestine, west of the Jordan, at the time of Joshua's invasion. They are first mentioned in an inscription of Amenhotep II, 1427 to 1400 BC, and also in the Amarna letters. Originally, the term probably applied either to Hurrian military aristocracy or to a class of merchants. By the time of Joshua, the Canaanites were a mixed group of people. In the Old Testament, the term Canaanites sometimes refers to all the people who lived west of Jordan. Other times, the term is restricted to the Phoenicians who lived along the coast. The biblical literature. The biblical books of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, which are the last few books of the Torah, which are the first 5 books of the Bible, and Joshua relate the rise of the Israelites from slaves in Egypt to a unified people. The theme of these books is God's mighty acts on behalf of his people in the historical and political events of the late Bronze Age. Though the focus of the biblical books is on God's activity and the response of Israel to that activity, we still catch glimpses of the larger world of the late Bronze Age. Several pivotal events shaped Israel as a people. The book of Exodus focuses on their escape from Egypt under the leadership of Moses and the making of the Great Covenant at Mount Sinai. The books of Leviticus and Numbers continue with the covenant relating more divine instructions from Mount Sinai. Numbers also narrates the experiences the Israelites faced before coming to the Promised Land, most significantly the wilderness wanderings. Finally, they were at the doorstep of Canaan. The book of Deuteronomy is written as Moses' farewell speeches to the people of Israel. They would enter the land under a new generation of leaders, which is the story of the book of Joshua. Egypt and the Exodus. At last, an Egyptian dynasty arose to expel the hated Hyksos rulers and begin the last great period of prosperity for ancient Egypt, the New Kingdom, in circa 1550 to 1069 BC. Perhaps from a desire to keep all foreigners at bay, the kings of this time were more expansionist than were previous Egyptian dynasties. King Thutmose III, 1479 to 1425 BC, for instance, expanded Egypt's boundaries through Palestine as far as the Euphrates River. These gains in Syria were soon challenged by an enemy from the north, the Empire of the Hittites in Asia Minor. One of Thutmose's descendants, Amenhotep IV, in 1352 to 1336 BC, is an especially remarkable New Kingdom ruler, rejecting the many gods of Egyptian religion. This king worshipped one god, the sun god named Aten. He changed his own name to Akhenaten. Ruins of Amarna show that the city-states of Palestine were in varying degrees of rebellion during Akhenaten's reign. His religious reforms died when he did. Another New Kingdom ruler, Ramses II, from 1279 to 1213 BC, was especially notable for his many building projects. Egyptian sources suggest that Ramses expanded the old Hyksos capital of Avaris and renamed it Ramses after himself. The city became the royal residence for the 19th and 20th dynasties. Ramses reigned for more than 60 years, but his successors inherited a weaker Egypt and never equaled his glory. Transition. The book of Exodus. The Hebrews' exodus from bondage in Egypt is the defining event in both in Israel's emergence as a nation and in the shape of the nation's faith. The book of Exodus devotes about equal space to the events and to the ensuing covenant. The first half, chapters 1 through 19, tells the history from Moses' birth through Exodus itself up to Israel's climactic encounter with God on Mount Sinai. The second half of the book, chapters 20 through 40, consists mostly of God's instructions to his covenant people, both general like the Ten Commandments and specific like the instructions for building the tabernacle, Israel's tent shrine. It is no denial of the divine origin of his covenant to note how it is couched in the language and customs of its day. For instance, it is interesting to note that the covenant's emphasis on one God was preceded by the failed reforms of Akhenatens, or again, the pattern for the giving of the covenant in Exodus 19 through 24 follows a very common Hittite treaty pattern, beginning with a prologue and continuing with a list of expectations, chapters 20 through 23. then concluding with the ratification ceremony in chapters 24. Exodus 1, 1 through 2:15. Exodus 1. The Israelites oppressed. These are the names of the sons of Israel who went to Egypt with Jacob, each with his family: Reuben, Simeon, Levi and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher. The descendants of Jacob numbered 70 in all. Joseph was already in Egypt. Now Joseph and all his brothers and all that generation died. But the Israelites were exceedingly fruitful. They multiplied greatly, increased in numbers, and became so numerous that the land was filled with them. Then a new king, to whom Joseph meant nothing, came to power in Egypt. Look, he said to his people, the Israelites have become far too numerous for us. Come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they will become even more numerous, and if war breaks out, will join our enemies, fight against us, and leave the country. So they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor, and they built Pithom and Ramses as store cities for Pharaoh. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread. So the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites and worked them ruthlessly. They made their lives bitter with harsh labor in brick and mortar, with all kinds of work in the fields. In all their harsh labor, the Egyptians worked them ruthlessly. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, whose names were Siphrah and Puah, when you are helping the Hebrew women during childbirth on the delivery stool, if you see that the baby is a boy, kill him. But if it is a girl, let her live. The midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do. They let the boys live. Then the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and asked them, why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live? Now, before we continue this chapter, health and medicine. In traditional cultures, births are usually attended only by women. A midwife is a woman with experience and training who can assist at births, recognize complications, and so forth. The most widespread practice, ancient and modern, is for mothers to deliver in a sitting position with a support like a delivery stool. Exodus 1:16. Now going back to chapter 1, verse 19. The midwives answered Pharaoh, Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are vigorous and give birth before the midwives arrive. So God was kind to the midwives, and the people increased and became even more numerous. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own. Now, this is one of the only times that lying was ever permissible. And it was when the Hebrew midwives protected God's children from death. When you're protecting somebody from murder, when you're protecting God's people from murder and protecting them from their enemy, that is considered joyous. That is considered a good thing. And if you have to lie to do it, that's the greater of two evils. And God will bless you and have the one that you did right excel more and be counted, whereas the lying will be pushed down. Then Pharaoh gave this order to all his people. Every Hebrew boy that is born you must throw into the Nile, but let every girl live. Exodus 2, the birth of Moses. Now a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Now, before we continue Exodus 2, we have a little commentary based on Exodus 2, 1 through 10. It's called The Birth of Sargon. The birth story of Moses, Exodus 2, 1 through 10, resembles a familiar theme in the ancient Near Eastern folklore: the explosion and rescue of an infant son, and his subsequent ascent to a position of royalty. One of the most famous versions of this theme is the birth legend of Sargon of Akkad, a ruler in central Mesopotamia around 2350 BC. Although many legends of Sargon abound, the earliest record of this is from the late 8th century BC. Some scholars maintain that the text was composed to commemorate the feats of a namesake of the Akkadian Sargon, Sargon II of Assyria, who lived during 721 to 705 BC. According to the story, Sargon was born to a high priestess and an unknown father. Sargon's birth was kept secret, and his mother set him in a basket among bulrushes, where he was found by a drawer of water. by a drawer of water. From these humble beginnings, Sargon is said to have been granted the love of Ishtar, the goddess of love and war. The goddess's love is regarded as a token of Sargon's title to the throne. The apparent similarities between the Sargon and Moses birth accounts, though fascinating, are nevertheless superficial. Now this is a little image based on that time, based on that story. It's one of the Sargons of Akkad. Now back to Exodus chapter 2, verse 5. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her female slave to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. This is one of the Hebrew babies, she said. Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women and nurse the baby for you?" "Yes, go," she answered. So the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you." So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, "I drew him out of the water." Moses flees to Midian. One day after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. Looking this way and that, and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. The next day he went out and saw two Hebrews fighting. He asked the one in the wrong, "Why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew?" Now, before we continue on, there's a small little commentary entitled Moses' Flight and Return to Egypt. Moses fled from Pharaoh through the Sinai desert and settled in the land of Midian, in the vicinity of Horeb, located by tradition in the Sinai Peninsula. God revealed himself in the burning bush and called Moses to go back to Egypt. Moses met Aaron in Horeb, and together they returned to Pharaoh's court in Ramses. Now this is what the map looks like. You have them starting around this way in Sinai. They come from Sinai and go up, and they both meet around the Gulf of Suez in the middle in the wilderness of Paran. You also have Goshen and On going this way, and Pithmoth going this way, and Pithom to Ramses that way by Egypt. And you have all this through here: Beersheba, the brook of Egypt, the way of Horus, the wilderness of Zin, Moab, Edom, Ezron, Gibbert, and then you have down here, you have Midian. And this is the map of the area and the paths that they would have taken. Now back to Exodus 2 in verse 14. The man said, "Who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian?" Then Moses was afraid and thought, "What I did must have become known." When Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in Midian, where he sat down by a well. Now this is a transition point into the transition to Exodus 16, chapter 2, verse 16. Transition. Moses and Midian. Within the official boundaries of the Egyptian Empire in Palestine in the arid Sinai Peninsula lived a diverse group called the Midianites. These people appeared sometime around the 13th century BC and were known as traders. See footnote Genesis 37:36. And metalworkers. Less clearly known is their religion, but there is some evidence that they worshipped in tent shrines in the desert. The tabernacle that Moses was commanded to build, Exodus 26, may be related to Midianite practices. Moses' father-in-law Reuel, Exodus 2:18, was after all a priest of Midian. Elsewhere, the names Jethro, Exodus 3:1, and Hobab in Judges 4:11's note are also given for the father-in-law of Moses. I wonder what CF stands for. I've always wondered that. Confer, which means compare. Okay, so it's a comparison. So compare it to Genesis 37:36. Now let's get back to the scripture. Exodus 2:16 through 6:30. Now, a priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and fill the troughs to water their father's flock. Some shepherds came along and drove them away, but Moses got up and came to their aid, their rescue, and watered their flock. When the girls returned to Reuel, their father, he asked them, "Why have you returned so early today?" They answered, "An Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds. He even drew water for us and watered the flock." "And where is he?" Reuel asked his daughters. "Why did you leave him? Invite him to have something to eat." Moses agreed to stay with the man who gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses in marriage. Zipporah gave birth to a son, and Moses named him Gershom, saying, "I have become a foreigner in a foreign land." During that long period, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out, and their cry for help because of their slavery went up to God. God heard their groaning, and he remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. So God looked on the Israelites and was concerned about them. Exodus 3. Moses in the burning bush. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, "I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up." When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, "Moses, Moses." And Moses said, "Here I am." "Do not come any closer," God said. "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground." Then he said, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, "I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I've come down to rescue them from the land of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now, go, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt." But Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" And God said, "I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on the mountain." Moses said to God, "Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' Then what shall I tell them?" God said to Moses, "I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites, 'I am has sent me to you.'" Now this is the title that Jesus was acclaiming to himself when he said, "Before Abraham was, I am." He was claiming himself equal and claiming himself to be God, and that's why the Jews, the Pharisees, wanted to stone him. God also said to Moses, "Say to the Israelites, 'The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name you shall call me from generation to generation. Go assemble the elders of Israel, and say to them, 'The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob appeared to me and said, I've watched over you, and I have seen what has been done to you in Egypt. And I have promised to bring you up out of your misery in Egypt into the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. The elders of Israel will listen to you. Then you and the elders are to go to the king of Egypt and say to him, 'The Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God.' But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless a mighty hand compels him. So I will stretch out my hand and strike the Egyptians with all that wonders that I will perform among them. After that he will let you go. And I will make the Egyptians favorably disposed towards this people, so that when you leave, you will not go empty-handed. Every woman is to ask her neighbor and any woman living in her house for articles of silver and gold and for clothing, which you will put on your sons and daughters, and so you will plunder the Egyptians." Exodus 4. Signs for Moses. Moses answered, What if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, 'The Lord did not appear to you'?" Then the Lord said to him, "What is it then in your hand? What is that in your hand?" "A staff," he replied. The Lord said, "Throw it on the ground." Moses threw it on the ground, and it became a snake, and he ran from it. Then the Lord said to him, "Reach out your hand and take it by the tail." So Moses reached out and took hold of the snake, and it turned back into a staff in his hand. "This," said the Lord, "is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you." Then the Lord said, "Put your hand inside your cloak." So Moses put his hand into his cloak, and when he took it out, the skin was leprous. It had become as white as snow. "Now put it back into your cloak," he said. So Moses put his hand back into his cloak, and when he took it out, it was restored, like the rest of his flesh. Then the Lord said, "If they do not believe you or pay attention to the first sign, they may believe the second. But if they do not believe these two signs or listen to you, take some water from Nile and pour it on the dry ground. The water you take from the river will become blood on the ground." Moses said to the Lord, "Pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue." And Makar, the heavy mouth. Exodus 4:10-16. Among the objections Moses raised against his going to Pharaoh, Exodus 3:11, was that he considered himself slow of speech and tongue, Exodus 4:10. In the Hebrew language, this condition is expressed literally as heavy of mouth and heavy of tongue. Moses' difficulties in speech are not unprecedented in ancient Near Eastern literature. And Makar, the Sumerian king of Uruk, and third successor to the famous Gilgamesh, is the main character of the Enmerkar and the Lord of Aratta, an epic written in Sumeria near the end of the 3rd millennium BC. In the brief passage, a messenger is unable to comprehend a message given to him by Enmerkar, and thus unable to verbally deliver it. Like Moses, Enmerkar was slow in speech, expressed in the epic as heavy of mouth. Therefore, the king of Uruk invented writing by putting the message on a piece of clay. This epic seems to explain the origin of writing, implying that writing did not exist before Enmerkar, circa 2700 to 2500 BC. In actuality, writing preceded Enmerkar by at least 500 years. The Lord said to him, so we're going back to Exodus 4. The Lord said to him, "Who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will help you speak, and will teach you what to say." But Moses said, "Pardon your servant, Lord. Please send someone else." Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses, and he said, "What about your brother, Aaron, the Levite? I know he can speak well. He is already on his way to meet you, and he will be glad to see you. You shall speak to him and put words in his mouth. I will help both of you speak and will teach you what to do. He will speak to the people for you, and it will be as if he were your mouth and as if you were God to him. But take this staff in your hand so you can perform the signs with it." So Moses returns to Egypt. Then Moses went back to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, "Let me return to my own people in Egypt to see if any of them are still alive." Jethro said, "Go, and I wish you well." Now, this follows with a time capsule in this study Bible. This time capsule covers the years 1660 to 1633 BC. In 1660 BC, we find horses in use in Nubia, the southern part of Egypt. In 1650, we see Hattusilus I making Hattusa the Hittite capital. In 1648 to 1540, the Hyksos dynasty controls Lower Egypt. In 1646 to 1626 BC, Ammisadak was king of Babylon. In 1634, the Hittite king Hattusilus I destroys Alalak. In 1633 to 1550, Egypt's 17th dynasty rules at Thebes. Now let's continue in Exodus 14, verse 19. Now the Lord had said to Moses in Midian, "Go back to Egypt, for all those who wanted to kill you are dead." So Moses took his wife and sons, put them on a donkey, and started back to Egypt, and he took the staff of God in his hand. The Lord said to Moses, "When you return to Egypt, see that you perform before Pharaoh all the wonders I have given you the power to do. But I will harden his heart so that he will not let the people go. Then say to Pharaoh, this is what the Lord says. Israel is my firstborn son, and I told you, let my son go, so he may worship me. But you refused to let him go, so I will kill your firstborn son. At a lodging place on the way, the Lord met Moses and was about to kill him. But Zipporah took a flint knife, cut off her son's foreskin, and touched Moses' feet with it. Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me, she said, so the Lord let him alone. At the time she said bridegroom of blood, referring to circumcision. The Lord said to Aaron, go into the wilderness to meet Moses. So he met Moses at the mountain of God and kissed him. Then Moses told Aaron everything the Lord had sent him to say, and also about all the signs he had commanded him to perform. Moses and Aaron brought together all the elders of the Israelites, and Aaron told them everything the Lord had said to Moses. He also performed the signs before the people, and they believed. And when they heard that the Lord was concerned about them and had seen their misery, they bowed down and worshipped. Now, in tomorrow's live stream, we are going to go through Exodus chapter 5 and so on. And we're going to continue reading and have another hour. But this is where we have to end. So I'm going to end in prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for the blessings. Thank you for dying on the cross for our sins, Lord. Thank you for bringing me through the day, and thank you for bringing these people through the day into the night. I pray that you bring them through the night also, and have them dream dreams and visions and see you. Have them be connected to your word and have them be fulfilled by you. I hope that this was able to give them some insight and better understanding of the area that was going on in the culture at the time during the scriptures. And I hope they continue to grow in your name. And it's in your precious, holy, and powerful name that I pray. Amen. I hope you guys have a great one.